I'm Dan O'Sullivan, founder and partner at the Hired Pens. We're an agency based in Boston and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, specializing in copywriting and speech writing. And I'm here with Tyler Scionti, founder and head specialist at the content marketing firm Centori. We're going to talk about the use of artificial intelligence, including ChatGPT, to write blog posts and other marketing content. So welcome, Tyler.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here and looking forward to a good discussion. It's a lot of hot button issues we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for making the time. First of all, tell us a little bit about what you do at Centori. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, sure thing. So, like you said, we're a content marketing firm. I think about myself as a content marketing specialist. I really began with a focus in SEO and organic marketing, but really branching out beyond that towards content strategy and how we help our clients show up at every point in the funnel and every point in the buyer's journey. Mainly work with B2B software companies and financial services, because I've had backgrounds in both of those once upon a time before I started on Centori full time.
Okay. Well, at Hired Pens, we do a lot of work writing for clients, writing for their blogs, that is. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, what kind of guidance are you typically providing your clients when it comes to their corporate blog?
Yeah, great question. Blogging is one of those things I think has always been misunderstood. I used to work at HubSpot, and so I have a lot of history there and the power of inbound marketing. And HubSpot is an inbound marketing juggernaut, and for good reason. They create a ton of content, and they kind of have evangelized that as a process that any business can use to grow. And I think there's a lot of good in that, but I think there's a lot of danger in that too. A lot of folks, I would say, approach blogging as let's just throw content up on the blog, and maybe eventually, someday, somehow, by magic, people will land on our website and become customers. And I found, especially as the web has grown more crowded, and AI helps with that, you got to take a step back and think, what is the content that our ideal customers need to become a buyer? What are the questions they're asking at the top of the funnel and the start of their journey when they're just discovering that they have a problem? And how do those questions change as they research solutions and as they kind of discover what's out there and then make a buying decision? And I think the top thing I recommend, the top advice in terms of how to use your blog, is align it with an actual person and their buying journey and their buying experience, rather than, oh, here's what a keyword research told us to do, or every blog post should be 800 words because so and so said that. It doesn't really work that way, especially now. Aligning with the buyer's journey still continues to work, even as AI changes the game for marketers.
Yeah, the point you made about HubSpot, I guess, putting a priority on creating useful content, right?
Hmm.
We used to be HubSpot customers, and I remember them talking about, think in terms of the buyer, um, think about creating content that they can actually apply in their businesses. And I think people sometimes forget about that element of it, right?
Totally, totally. And I think, wind the clock back 20 years when websites were still fairly newer things, in the mid 2000s. Just having content by virtue of that, you had a chance of being found and standing out, and that was pretty different. Uh, Wind the clock now forward to 2025, everyone's got a website and everyone has a blog, and it's not necessarily having content, period, but it's having content that speaks to your target market, that actually adds value, and ultimately builds that familiarity and that trust, and that's the key really to results when we're talking about it, not just traffic, but customers, dollars, and the folks who pay people like us to do marketing for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and identifying content that meets that standard and then actually writing it or have someone writing it takes time,
Hmm.
takes money. So I imagine organizations are starting to turn to AI to write blog posts. How much of that are you seeing at this point?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't lost any of I'm knock on wood, if any of you see this video or read the recording, but I haven't lost any clients yet who said, hey, we're replacing with a robot. And I think a lot of that's because clients I have, and I'm sure you probably experienced similar things. I mean, they value good work and they value the process and what the process is able to create. Where I see AI really hurting the industry and changing right now, this could change in a few years because they're always evolving, But right now, where AI is pretty good at generating some pretty basic content. And there's a lot of content shops that base their entire business on you can hire a writer for a couple of pennies a word overseas. And AI is probably about as good as some of those writers. That is dangerous if your value proposition is, hey, I can write content too. Um, those are the ones that I'm seeing really hurt. The freelancers who don't bring a whole lot to the table or certainly anything original. The freelancers who are saying, hey, I want to get into writing because I've heard writing can be a good career. You have to hire anybody, so why not hire me? Well, ChatGPT or Claude are $20 a month and they're always on. They don't ask for raises, they don't ask for a vacation, they don't take vacations, and so they're much easier to work with. And they don't miss deadlines because you ask it a question or you ask it to write a blog post and it responds in 30 seconds. You don't have to chase someone down. And you just pay $20 a month, no matter how much you use it. So that's a very clear value proposition, but it also spits out pretty basic content. I see a lot of businesses thinking, oh, rather than pay people, which are very difficult to work with, let's just pay an app to create our content. I think a lot of them are also finding content's pretty boring and pretty generic. And you still have to use it too. And you have to know what to prompt it and you have to know what to edit. And even if you do know some of those things, if you're not an experienced marketer, the output, it's going to be about as good as you are. And a lot of people hired marketers because they weren't marketers and they weren't really good at marketing, And so I think what we're really turning to find is a lot of business owners for small businesses who think that, oh, I can just use ChatGPT to create all my content. And they're getting the output that they were going to be able to create anyway. They're just saving a lot of time and a bit of money. But is that actually working? That's the real question is, does pretty generic, bland, boring, unimaginative content turn readers into buyers? From experience, not quite so much. But it is, I think, raising the bar and raising the floor for what marketers are able to do. And that's been the biggest impact that I've seen in the past year.
Okay, I certainly want to ask you more about the quality.
Yeah.
As a copywriter, I'll be upfront. I mean, a lot of these questions are self-serving,
Yeah.
and I'll get to more of those. But before that, you mentioned ChatGPT, you mentioned Claude. Are those kind of the primary AI tools that businesses might be using for this purpose?
I think so. I mean, those are the core, like they're the ones that are the providers for AI. We're also in this kind of interesting market where you've got OpenAI, you've got Anthropic, so OpenAI with ChatGPT, Anthropic made Claude, DeepSeek is a new Chinese competitor. Google has Gemini, and so you have these massive, massive companies with the data, and then you can talk directly to their models, or you can use essentially smaller products which are built on top of that data. So things like Jasper, there's a million writing apps that all tell you that they can rank your website and create amazing content and all that stuff. But really, they're in tech terms, we call them wrappers for OpenAI and Anthropic. I mainly use Claude personally. I use it pretty regularly, and I'm sure you got questions on how, and I'll be able to get to that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, let's get back to that. I wanted to hear, first of all, getting back to the quality of the content. So, what would
Mhm.
you see as a few giveaways that a blog post is AI generated? Can you get a little more into the specifics of that?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I see all the time people post on LinkedIn about M dashes being a clear giveaway. And I love M dashes and I've used them for
Same.
years. I guess I'm a computer. Or like words like delve. And those are the easy things to change. Those are the simple things that these models can always adjust so that way you can be AI proof or AI undetected. I think the thing that doesn't change is is the imaginativeness of the content and the how opinionated it is. A lot of these models are afraid and really unable to say anything too opinionated. You can only really say within a certain kind of boundary things that are acceptable. But if you ask them to say something opinionated, then they're going to use pretty soft language, I found. And that makes it challenging from OpenAI's perspective. They have to have limits and guardrails around their tool. But as people, what we can do is we can say whatever we want and not really care. Um, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. But I find that when AI content says it's not opinionated, it's basically saying a lot of things without saying anything really pointed or really on the nose. And that is typically a giveaway because when you leave AI content alone and just publish whatever, it's going to be pretty bland. It's going to be pretty unimaginative. It's going to be fairly non-controversial. And when I see stuff on LinkedIn and I see stuff published on websites that says a lot without saying really much of anything, it usually clues me into AI. And there's often times where I've been researching content for some of my clients. I do a lot of reading when I'm trying to learn up on some stuff. And, I'll see as I kind of parse through different websites, I'll ask Claude a question and I'll get some background, but I'll also go to Google and read up on websites that are publishing this stuff. And I'll find some similar content, that they just published. And clearly they took content from Claude or ChatGPT and didn't reformat it. And it's just kind of lazy marketing, in my opinion. And it also doesn't really help them further their goals because they're just
Mm.
publishing stuff out there without actually having an opinion or saying anything.
As a copywriter, what gets me is I know what kind of research goes into writing a blog post for a client. And you mentioned before about the generic nature of the content. Well, if I have a client, say in the life sciences field,
Mhm.
and I'm writing about a blog post about a fairly scientific topic, I can't imagine just entrusting, say, ChatGPT with that because my research is ideally going to involve interviewing, say, a doctor or two or a researcher or two, and then doing
Mhm.
some independent research. I can't imagine that ChatGPT and the like could come up with anything that is compelling to a sophisticated audience that would presumably be targeted, for or by a company like that.
Totally. I mean, what I think ChatGPT as marketers, where it really excels is exactly what you said there. You spend time interviewing a doctor. You're spending your time and you're spending that doctor's time, and there are dollar value amounts to that. Versus, well, you could ask ChatGPT a few questions for background or context, or kind of like an introductory to a topic that maybe then allows you to ask more pointed, more direct questions to that doctor that really get at the truth. I mean, I got a client in the lab software space, and oftentimes when I'm looking for kind of background or context and really basic stuff, that's where Claude can be pretty helpful. Or I'll talk to their team. Um, Other times, I do need those actual expert insights. I need to cite a study on how labs operate, or something from like the National Institute of Health or some like lab paper that was written, like an academic paper. I find that AI is really good at the intro to concepts, and where content, both I'd imagine copywriting and where blog posts become really, really effective is when they're specific and when they speak to a person and when they actually add value and they enlighten and they educate. And that really happens when you scratch below the surface. I find that AI is a piece of that, but it's not the whole thing. And you don't get the whole thing without really knowing where to look. And I think a lot of that comes from expertise.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I am curious, are there some businesses for whom having well researched, well written, original content isn't really as important? Is it, are there some businesses that for whatever reason, just getting words up on a screen and enough of them to make a blog post is good enough?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think it ultimately goes into what's the effort for the sale. I have a client that sells shoe insoles online, and that's the only e-commerce client I have. I've had them for years, and we built a whole strategy based on how do people buy insoles. Well, we did a survey of why people buy insoles because I don't wear insoles personally. We find that people buy them for a specific type of shoe to relieve a specific condition or for an activity, and so we ditched their blog, which wasn't bringing any traffic, and we just built a website with collections mirroring those categories, the way that people buy insoles. And so really they don't need blog content to make a buying decision because it's a $30 to $40 pair of insoles. A blog's not going to convince you of anything. like a blog. Oh, they have a great blog post. So let me buy their insoles. It's all about convenience and all about specificity. In that case, it's a very small buying decision and it's a very narrow buying window. So it's only so much content you need. And the content is, I need insoles for Achilles tendonitis. So great, hopped onto Google. Here's this website, insoles.com. Great, they have insoles for Achilles tendonitis. Let me buy the first pair, or the first pair that I like. In a B2B buying scenario, ultimately, it can be a pretty narrow question if you know exactly what you want if you're buying B2B software. But also, it might be a longer sales cycle and a longer buying journey. You might not immediately jump to the specific type of software that you're looking for, but you might have a problem in your day to day, in your business, in your job, that type of thing. That's where content can be really helpful because that content can answer a question, it can solve a problem, it can open your eyes to the solutions available. And that ultimately supports that buying journey as it moves from the top of the funnel where you're not problem aware all the way down to where you're solution aware. And that also goes for the financial services space. I mean, you're entrusting your life savings and probably your kids and your grandkids' inheritance with an institution. You need a lot of convincing that you're making the right decision. And that's where content can be really helpful at brand building. That power is the inverse if it's bad content. Because if someone doesn't put effort into the content that they put out there, it turns you off at the very least. You stop reading, like people have an attention span of 3 seconds. So you get in 3 seconds in the post and you leave, you end up on a competitor site, you get into their funnel. At the very least, it can do that. Or it can show that you have a brand that doesn't really present itself very well, and that could just completely turn you off and have you reject the brand. So it really kind of depends on what's the dollar amount that someone is spending and the amount of care that they put into that purchasing decision. And that's where content can be helpful at either building a relationship and building trust, or it can just completely end the relationship, which is, a lot more power people think when they press publish on a blog post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So looking at the negative side, then again, of having subpar blog content, do you have any examples of businesses you've seen, maybe, clients before you started working with them, that had really poor content and perhaps how that was affecting their overall success?
Yeah. I don't want to name anyone in particular, but I definitely have had clients who they came to me because their content wasn't working. That's the ultimate reason that I get clients is they tried it, didn't work. We're going to try something new, and I'm sure you'd experience the same thing because everyone's got websites with words on them. They hire specialists to try and figure out what's going on. A lot of the times it didn't work. It wasn't because of AI, though that has happened a little bit more recently. A lot of it is just older other agencies that basically were publishing 300 to 500 word blog posts that really, just like AI is doing, had words on a page that really didn't say much. They didn't add any value. They didn't really answer the question. They didn't call people to action. They didn't inspire buying decisions. So people would say, hey, we got all these blog posts on our website. They're not doing anything. It's like, well, they're not really convincing anyone to do anything, and therefore they're not going to do anything for you. What you need to do is think about how you're building relationships with your audiences, and that's happened for a lot of my clients and prospective clients. And nowadays, it's a lot of conversations of, well, we tried AI to write a bunch of blog posts. We published 200 blog posts, and they're not doing anything. Well, great. They're not doing anything because they're not designed to. What you need to do is understand that buyer's journey. Just recently, actually, I got a shout out on LinkedIn from a recent client who, was in a similar situation where they had a ton of SEO content that didn't do anything. And we worked together in the summer, and their traffic is like 10x since just by publishing very intentional, persona-driven content to call people to action. And it really is as simple as that. It's also hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So a blog post, you push that button, it gets published. Now you want to get it out in the world and make sure it gets read. What are some best practices for marketing a blog?
Yeah, it's a good question because I've changed my view on it a little bit. I view your process once you publish, it's all about distribution. SEO is that organic kind of automatic distribution channel. You publish something, Google hits your website, it indexes it. The way to rank really when it comes to SEO, it's two things. You can either have a lot of authority, so that's backlinks to your website and just the age of your website. As your website gets older, gets more traffic, it compounds. It's kind of like compound interest. And your authority builds. Then as you publish more content, it just kind of ranks automatically, and that's great. Um, there's the authority piece, or you can pick your spot smartly. You can go after and be very strategic with the content topics you create, the way that you structure that content, making it as comprehensive and authoritative as possible, those types of things. I'm not going to rank for SEO, but I do rank for, what are impressions in Google Search Console. I rate a lot of content on Google Search Console because a lot of my persona, my target market has trouble with it and understanding it. So that's how I get a lot of my traffic and leads as a result. So SEO is one piece. The other piece, though, is there's a lot of distribution channels outside of SEO. You can use Google Ads to boost content, to build traffic really quickly. It takes budget, and you have to make sure that you can be willing to spend and invest in it. But that's a good hack way to say, okay, if this content ranked, how would it perform? How many leads could it get? So that's something that I've been testing out myself, as well as social media. Wherever your audience is, you want to have your content up there. Sharing on LinkedIn or reformatting a blog post and then linking to that blog post, maybe in a comment on a so like a LinkedIn post or something like that. Um, Turning into a video, making a quick video of you kind of recording and walking through that blog post and posting that on YouTube. Like distribution really can happen in a number of ways. That one content piece is saying we're creating a piece of content to address a question or fill a need. Now it's up to us to get traffic to it. Either traffic happens because it's good content, or we manufacture traffic by posting, driving ads, those types of things.
So for any given blog post, do you recommend promoting it a certain number of times on X or on LinkedIn?
Yeah, good question. Because I think it really depends on it depends on where your audience is. So if your audience is on X, that's where you want to build your presence. But when I build a topic cluster for a client, we've got like that lab software company. We've got a bunch of different products on, or sorry, blog posts on all these different questions that people ask, maybe on buying this type of lab software, or maybe on compliance regulations in the lab space. And basically, I look at the content that I've written for them. We put it in two categories: what's outperforming and actually driving traffic. It's ranking, it's bringing in free traffic in perpetuity as long as it ranks. We don't really have to do much with that. It's bringing in maybe hundreds of clicks a month or that type of thing. What content is underperforming? That's basically content that we've invested in. I've invested the time, my clients invested the money, not getting a return for the business. So that is the content that we look to distribute, because that is content that needs traffic. So we might run a Google ad campaign for it. We might recommend posting it on social media. We might recommend sharing it in a newsletter. I mean, all your content can be shared in a newsletter, but if we're looking for what we want to promote, I like to break it down into the kind of the performers and the underperformers. And the underperformers are the ones that we have to supplement a little bit, versus the ones that are performing. They're already doing their job. They're bringing in that traffic for free, all from Google.
Let's move on to how we can leverage AI to create blog
Mm-hmm.
content. I'm still early stage in terms of adopting ChatGPT. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say to date, I've used it sometimes to help with writing headlines, sometimes do a little research about a topic, but not too much beyond that. How are you using it, and how can companies in general use it in good ways as opposed to just depending on it to crank out mediocre content?
Yeah. I find that ChatGPT, like I said earlier, really excels at that base level knowledge. I almost think of it as like a librarian. You go to the library and you say, I'm looking for a resource on X or a primer on Y. Similar to how maybe like the Google featured snippets would work, or Ask Jeeves. It's kind of the similar thing. Um, if I'm trying to understand a complex financial topic, like I just wrote a blog post on treasury yields are rising. Oh, they've dropped a little bit, but they've risen since last summer. What does that mean for the economy? And so now I want a primer on treasury yields. Now I could read a 5,000 word article from Investopedia, but really I just want a quick primer on it. And that's a great answer or a great question to ask Claude or ChatGPT. So I used to spend maybe an hour interviewing my clients to better understand and get their expert insights. Now I get the basic knowledge so I can ask them kind of very specific questions. And really, well, what's your firm's stance on this? How do you differentiate? Why do you believe that? Do you agree or disagree with this? And that's where you get the interesting questions and the interesting insights. And that's what ultimately makes someone say, I want to buy from them versus that other company. Because ultimately, people make decisions based on who they agree with and who aligns with them and their core worldviews. And that's where content can really differentiate and excel. But I find that Claude, I love using Claude over ChatGPT, just between the two. It's really helpful when it comes to getting that base level knowledge. It's really helpful when I need really basic text to work from. But I find that a lot of the text it creates, I would never use it as copy because it's like the kind of content I just skip through rather than the content that I read. So I read it to get a solid base foundational understanding that can then be branched off of in a number of different ways based on the client, their unique voice, their unique stance and perspective, um, which accelerates the writing process. It's not like I joke sometimes I'm the marketing team for 5 different companies. It's not that I get to do all of that in an hour a day. It takes a lot more time than that, but it takes a little bit less time probably than it would have, 5 years ago, which is fine by me. And it's just kind of interesting to see how that evolves. And ultimately, I think it saves my clients a lot more time than it saves me, though it does save me a bit.
Hmm. Outside of blog writing, how are you seeing AI enter the marketing world?
I think it's interesting. There's a lot of other ways that I've used it. I mean, analyzing data is super, super interesting. One thing that I've done with one of my clients is taken all of their customer, not all, but a lot of their customer conversations and fed that to Gemini and then ask it questions, almost like we can interview the customers. So like the type of data ingestion that you can do with AI is really astounding and it's really useful. There's a YouTube video that was an hour long. It was an SEO related video, and I didn't want to watch an hour long video. So I took the transcript and I fed that to Claude, and then I asked Claude a few questions and to summarize it. And that was super, super impactful and super powerful. It saved me a ton of time. And it was kind of one of those really interesting ways that you can think, hey, what are some outside the box ways that I can speed up time here and learn about something?
Hmm. What shifts do you see in content now that AI use is becoming more widespread?
I think the biggest thing is that it's democratizing the creation of content. I don't think it's democratizing the performance or growth of companies. Coming from HubSpot had an army of content writers, and HubSpot's view was they called it surround sound. We're gonna be everywhere our audience is. We're gonna answer every single question that they could ask. We're gonna have content for all of it, and that worked for HubSpot. HubSpot, huge venture-backed company, millions upon millions of dollars in revenue. Massive, massive content team. They could do it. No one else could. Now, someone can write a script, they can pull a list of maybe 1,000 keywords from SEMrush and then run a script hooking up to Claude to write 1,000 blog posts targeting those keywords, and then maybe run another script to just automatically publish that to a WordPress website. Suddenly, what HubSpot did is not special. Anyone can create thousands of blog posts. The real question is that the point? Was that the point? No one's going to say that, well, HubSpot, massive company, obviously it helped them. I see the web getting a lot more crowded because anyone can do that. So doing that or publishing at scale isn't what sets you apart. I really think that there's going to be a shift more towards that. Well, this is the content that speaks to me. This is what meets me where I am. And this is what really inspires action. Um, People have short attention spans, and there's a huge premium to get their attention. And as the web shifts to becoming more and more noisy and more crowded, that premium gets more and more expensive. So I think either AI is going to have to truly be good enough to set itself apart from the crowd and create truly unique content, or ultimately it's going to raise the floor for what content can really do. And the people who are able to rise above it are the ones that are going to succeed. And that hasn't been that different than the past 10 years. It's just making it so more people can enter the game, which is going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
So looking ahead, do you think it's inevitable that AI generated content becomes more and more dominant, or do you think there's anything that could slow or reverse that trend?
I think it's inevitable for sure. I've known people who hired freelancers to post on their behalf on LinkedIn. And what's the difference really between opening up ChatGPT and asking for 100 LinkedIn posts? At the end of the day, they weren't creating the content. And so people always shifted that way. They always try to offload the creative responsibility to somebody else. And AI is not going to change that. AI just makes it a lot cheaper. Because it's probably cheaper than hiring a freelancer in a lot of cases. So that's just the natural human tendency. But were those posts even good? Were they getting results? I don't think that changes. And ultimately, like I said earlier, I think AI, the output is only as good as your input. And if your input is not very good, the output's not going to be very good. It's going to be pretty generic and uninspiring, and it's just going to add to the noise. Um, the thing that really makes marketers different, and I'd be curious if you agree, but anyone can write words. What makes us different is the thought that we put into before we start writing and the editing process after. If I'm writing a web page, I probably go through like 30 different revisions and I spend hours thinking about what it is that I want to say. And even then, I'm not satisfied. It's not, well, I loaded up a prompt, write me a landing page for XYZ or write me a blog post for ABC, but it's a lot of thought that goes into it. And that I don't see AI really replicating unless you put a lot of thought into your input, into your prompt. And the only person I see really doing that is folks like us, marketers who know that that's what you have to do. Um, it's similar to you can have the fanciest kitchen with all the appliances and shop at Whole Foods, but if you don't know how to cook, then you're not going to make anything special. You can have a really rundown kitchen, with mediocre ingredients, but if you really, really know what you're doing, you'll make a decent meal. I see it as similar scenario. I don't think that people have caught up to that yet. I don't think that they've realized it yet. I say that as a hopeful marketer that believes that good content's going to win out and good content comes from good thinking. But I guess we'll just have to see. But I don't think people are going to stop using AI for it because they didn't stop using over freelancers or the cheapest options before.
The tricky thing, I think, is when it comes to evaluating the quality of the writing, if you're not, a lot of people who aren't writers also aren't good evaluators of writing,
Hmm.
which many people would freely admit. So I do fear that businesses turn to AI. They're, the blog posts are up there. They
Hmm.
look fine, but I think ultimately the quality won't be there, at least at this stage of AI. And then really it's just a question of, is it delivering the results that you need?
Hmm.
Which maybe will take a little while to figure out. But I do have concerns that just at a immediate level, um, what AI puts out there is going to be good enough for a lot of people. And that will hurt copywriters like me, of course, but ultimately it'll also hurt businesses if they think they're in good shape with that content when in reality it's not generating results.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a weird situation because I see a lot of confirmation of where things are heading. Just anytime you open up Reddit and you go on like the marketing copywriting subreddit, and there's people who are saying, I'm losing my job to AI. And I think that a lot of the companies that are just saying, well, it's good enough, we're just going to use AI anyway, probably weren't paying a premium for content anyway. And they probably weren't going to be the best clients. You know, I think what's going to be interesting is for those clients, those businesses that really, really value um, the um, the presence and the image that they put out on the web, that might be augmented or aided by AI, but at least where AI is at this point, it needs a deeper conversation, because ultimately my thinking on content has evolved from, does it sound good to me is an impressive to me towards does this work? And work really is does this drive traffic? Does this generate leads? Are those leads turning into revenue? And it's a simple, really simple equation. There's building blocks and pieces and components to an effective page that can lead to that. Um, I don't see evidence that AI can really replace the good marketing thinking that goes into knowing that beforehand, in order to ensure that that ends up the end result. And so I see a world where marketers who can effectively use AI are going to be like the superheroes of marketing, because essentially with Claude, you have like an army of interns who work for you now. And that's super powerful if you're a really good manager, but if you're not, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can still have an army of interns, but they're only as good as you. And if you're not very good, then you're not going to be very effective. And until we get to a world where I think really we have some sort of AGI, like the general intelligence that they keep promising and hasn't really been delivered yet. That's, there's opportunity. I think the challenge is for us marketers is how do we stand out in the market? And you know, my wife always tells me when I get stressed out about that, she says, "What would you tell your clients? Just take your own advice." And it's finding out what your customers value, who your ideal clients are, how they make their buying decisions, and how can you start conversations with them, and kind of tuning out a lot of the noise that tends to be distracting. I'd be curious from your point of view, are you saying something similar? Because I can kind of like pontificate all I want, but I mean, do you agree, disagree, or are you seeing different things in the market? I'm also curious from like SEO is heavily commoditized. I'd imagine copywriting is too to a degree. So are you seeing a similar thing in the market and adjusting?
Yeah, I mean, I would say when it comes to blog posts, it's definitely commoditized. It's been for a long time,
Hmm.
but I think even more so now. I think 10 years ago, we had a few clients that relied on us to write a few blog posts a month, and now we have fewer for sure. We're down to just a handful.
Hmm.
Um, and I think back in the day, it was partly because people. I've always thought businesses viewed their blog post almost undervalued the content that was going up there because you publish a blog post, it's up there, and then maybe 2 3 days later you publish another one and that gets pushed down, and before you know it, it's out of sight, out of mind. um,
Hmm.
the successful blog post will still have people searching for that topic and will still get read, but it feels like kind of a disposable medium, right? So
Hmm.
I think the onset of AI has just accelerated that process, the devaluation of the writing that goes into a blog post. So yeah, we're kind of, except for those clients who really, because of what they do and the audience that they're targeting, um, those clients that demand higher quality, well researched content, we're pretty much assuming just about everyone else isn't going to be interested in that anymore. So
Hmm.
that's the way it is. Not the worst thing in the world, because if a company wanted to hire us to crank out, you know, 20 blog posts a month that just fill space, mm, we're not really interested in that anyway. So
Yeah.
that's all right. Um, and then I think SEO website writing is somewhat similar. I mean, years ago we would occasionally get inquiries about, hey, we want to write this massive website, and we want to hire you guys to write 100 pages, and that sounds great at first, and then you realize what they have in mind for the content, and how little time they expect you to put into it, or at least
Hmm.
uh, how little they want to pay for it, and suddenly those projects aren't very appealing from our perspective. So yeah, the commoditization has taken place, and it's definitely steered us in some different directions.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because like I see so many people pop out of nowhere saying, I run a marketing agency. And it's like, okay, have you done marketing before? And it's like, no, and I think that I think ultimately it's about outcomes rather than inputs. And for some reason, marketing especially is plagued by this. People focus so much on the inputs. We're going to do this for you, this deliverable. You're paying for 5 blog posts a month. And really, businesses aren't paying for 5 blog posts a month. They're paying for the leads that they get. And marketers, I think, especially in copy, because like copy is a sales tool. But like content and blog posts, even, they help and influence the sales process because they affect how you show up in the buyer's journey. They build familiarity, they build trust. You know, I think that a shift really needs to happen in marketing, and this is my hill that I die on, but focusing on the outcomes that you generate rather than the inputs. At the end of the day, whether I write 2 blog posts a month for my clients or 6, or a combination of that and like email newsletters, that type of thing, it doesn't matter what I actually did. What matters is every month I'm sending them a report. Hey, here's the traffic that you got this month. Here's how much you grew in the last 6 months. Here's the leads that you generated purely from SEO. And that's what we're doing. Like the blog posts are a tool to generate leads at the end of the day. It's a tool to generate traffic and that's a tool to generate leads. And the businesses, I think, that just view it as, well, we just have to blog every Friday, or we just have to send a newsletter every Friday. They're going to find out that just sending a newsletter every Friday isn't good enough. If it doesn't actually inspire action, if it doesn't resonate with your audience, if it's not good or interesting, or different or worth someone giving you their time and attention. And I think that a lot of people will say, oh, well, we tried blogging or we tried having a website and it didn't work. And it's usually because they have that attitude, the commoditization of it. It's just stuff we just put out there versus no, we're building a website that's designed to attract, educate, engage, and convert readers into buyers. And that's where marketing really is effective. And until AI can convince the entire world that, hey, this is how the right way to do marketing, when I ask it about marketing, it still gives me super basic generic stuff. So until it learns from, you know, the real experts, there's experts like us who can just work a lot faster thanks to AI and hopefully demonstrate our value or at least continue to.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, thank you, Tyler Scionti. Thank you for joining me and talking some marketing and AI. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Awesome joining you. And well, it'll be fun to see at the end of this year how our predictions kind of shifted out. So we'll just have to wait till then.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye.